I'm the program lead for the Internet Archive's Open Library. We are an internet library catalog with millions of books that you can borrow directly from your browser through the Internet Archive's controlled digital lending library. Today, I would love to give you a short tour of how to use the Open Library's APIs, or programmable interfaces, to build book websites of your own. So the first thing that I'd like to show off is our API portal, which can be discovered at the bottom of the page here under the Develop section in the footer. It says API documentation. So we'll give that a click. There's two APIs that I think are going to be especially useful to you, and those are the book APIs and also the search APIs. Before we jump into either one of those, I'd like to show off something pretty cool that makes Open Library unique and different from a lot of websites, which is almost every single URL on Open Library is itself an API. And I'll show you what I mean. Right now we are on openlibrary.org/developers/API. And this is a wiki page. So if you've used Wikipedia before, anyone can make modifications or propose edits to Wikipedia. Open Library works in a very similar way, where we have the ability to suggest edits. But another interesting side effect of this is that if I add the extension .json onto any URL just like this one, we're going to see that it itself is an API. We can see when this page was created. All of this is valid JSON. So I'm going to go back to our API listing, but this fact is going to come in really handy as we continue to do our exploration. So the first API I'm going to take a look at, or the set of APIs, is for our books. And this is a way to get the information that we need for a specific book, or multiple books at a time. And so here we see that there's a few ways to go about this. The most common one is, if you know the work ID for a book, a work ID is something that starts with an OL, it has a bunch of numbers, and then it terminates with the capital letter W, and that signifies work. If we happen to know the work ID, then we can go to openlibrary.org/works, and then slash the Open Library work ID, and add JSON to the end of it. And if we press enter here, we see all of the top level information for this work. And for those who are less familiar with what a work is a logical collection of different versions or editions of a book. So it might be the case that we have edition 1 or edition 2, or maybe we even have Lord of the Rings, Return of the King in French and in Spanish. All of those different editions would show up under the work API. So by default, what we're learning here is the description of the work. That is the broad container representing all of these different editions. So we see a description, we're able to see subjects about this book, we're able to learn the identifiers for the book covers, which can then be plugged into the covers API. We can show that off later. We learn about people in this book, the authors, and oftentimes we can use these identifiers like authors /OL ... we can actually plug that into the URL here. We're going to keep .json. And when we press enter, magically we have an API for this author as well. We see that the author of this specific book is Roald Dahl. And again, something very neat, if I remove .json, we just get to the human readable version of this website. So this is an author page that you would get to when you're searching for an author. And if you remove the author name and then just add .json, we're right into the API. And there's also an opportunity to expose this as YAML if you prefer as well. All right, so going back to our book API, this is giving us our work level data, but you might be interested in knowing more about the different editions associated with this work. So what you can do here is, after the work ID, /work/OL. There's some numbers and then the W. We're going to add another slash, and we are going to say editions, and we're going to keep that .json at the end. It's going to return an enumerated list of all of the different editions associated with this work. And this is where we start to learn some pretty interesting things about each of those editions. For instance, here we have a German edition of the Fantastic Mr. Fox. If we keep scrolling down, we'll see one that's also in Polish. A whole lot of variety here. So this is a great way to help surface different editions of a work. So again, work is kind of the container, and within a work, we have a bunch of editions, some of which we may actually be able to read on the Internet Archive's controlled digital lending program. And what I would love to see is more websites using both the work and the editions APIs to talk about books online, and also to include links to help readers all throughout the internet find borrowable or readable copies of books. So instead of maybe posting a Goodreads or an Amazon link, which are also great, this might in certain cases be a great opportunity to help people discover borrowable source material that you can then open up and read. So that is the work API and the edition API. The same thing works for an edition. An edition looks like /books, again capital OL followed by some numbers, but then it terminates with an M. So in this case, if we plug in /books and then the Open Library ID for the edition.json, we will get the JSON information just for that specific edition. And this includes things like library thing ID, Goodreads ID, when this page was last modified, the title. A point of confusion we often get from the community is, I looked up a book, but I can't find its description. You'll notice that the description is missing here, but we did see the description on the work. So this is something we'd like to fix moving forward, but the solution here, which isn't a great one, is if you are on an edition API page, then you can look for the work identifier. Here you see works and then the work key. And if you make a separate request to the work, you should be able to get all of that high-level information. The work is probably the richest piece of metadata about a book. And so if you have both the work and a specific edition, you should have everything that you need to make a rich presentation on a website. Okay, so going back to the APIs, we've gone through most of the classic ways that one would take either a work ID or a book ID and get work level information, a list of all of the editions of a work, or how to get a specific edition's information. Another way to do this is if you have the ISBN for a book. So here is an example of an ISBN starting with 97801, yada, yada, yada. If we open up a new tab here, if we were to go to /ISBN/ this ISBN value and press enter, we would see it's going to redirect us to a book page. Something really neat about the ISBN endpoint is if that book is currently missing from our catalog, it will look through all of our friends and partner services and try to fill that in our catalog, and then resolve it to a page on Open Library. So here we can see we're just on a book page. We can remove the title from the URL and add .json after the ID, and we're right in the JSON API for this book. However, we don't have to go through all of these steps. An alternative is, instead of going to openlibrary.org/ISBN and then the ISBN value, we can just add .json to the end. So all we need to know is the ISBN number, and then it will automatically resolve to the right URL and give us the JSON data. So that's another powerful way to use our APIs by ISBN rather than work or edition identifier. We have some other more advanced APIs that will let you query by OCLC number, by Library of Congress number, and there's a variety of different formats. and options that you can pass to the API that are slightly more involved than I'm going to go into the video. But if you have any questions about how these work, or you find that one of our APIs isn't returning the data that you would like, send me an email at MEK, that's MEK, at archive.org, and I'll make sure to take care of you. And later this year, what we're hoping to do is combine our book edition API with our work API, so that when you search for a specific edition, it includes all of that rich metadata like the description, subjects, and everything else that you would expect. So I mentioned there were two collections of APIs that would be really useful. The second one is the Search API. The Search API is a great way to take a query string from a patron and convert that into a list of matches. So here we see a few examples. But before we even go into the API, I'd like to show you how this works in Open Library, just as a standard user doing a search. So someone goes to openlibrary.org, they click in the search region, and maybe they type Lord of the Rings. And when I press enter, it's going to go to openlibrary.org/search. Okay, so we did a search here, openlibrary.org.search is where it routed us, and we have a query parameter called Q, which is where our search has gone in, and we have some other stuff in here too, which we're going to ignore for now. The important detail is if we were to add .json to the end of our search here, then this search will magically turn into an API that we can use. And this is our Search API. So here we see that there are 505 results. We're seeing the first page. I believe we can add and page equals 2. And this will start showing us the next page of results. Now it's starting at the 100th result. And if we add page 3, this should increase to 200, which it does. And the rest of the documentation is outlined for interpreting the response format that we get from Solr, which is our search engine. And so given these two things, the book APIs and the search API, with only 100 or so lines of code, you can make something like this experiment that I threw together in an hour or two, called Bazam. So if anyone has gone to Shazam before, Shazam.com is a website that lets you hold up your phone to the radio when a song is playing, and it will help you identify what song was playing. So I thought it might be cool to do something just like that, except for books, where maybe I type in "Thanks for all the fish." Does anyone happen to know what book that is from? Well, if you don't happen to remember, it is able to come up with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is using a slightly different API than the search or the book API, and this is the full text search API, which is very similar here. Instead of going to search.json, what we're going to do is search/inside.json, and our Q is going to become "Thanks for all the fish." And if the demo lords are willing to help out, great. So we see that we have a few different matches in a handful of different books. And we could fine-tune this by turning this into having quotes around our "thanks for all the fish," and then we should get even more accurate results. And then we would see our Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy right there. Okay, so just by making a small tweak to which API we're using, we're able to basically do a full text search within every book that the Internet Archive has. And I can give you a little bit of a tour how we're achieving this. There we go. we can see that the actual code for this website is pretty darn sparse. There's a little bit of markup with some IDs, which represent where our results are going to get stuffed into after we make calls to the API. And then most of the magic is happening. This is just a small demo using jQuery. We're not doing anything special like Vue or React here. You could use whatever you want, but just for the sake of keeping things really small, we have around 40 lines of HTML here, and then most of the heavy lifting is happening in a file called index.js, and this file is only something like 100 lines or less of code. And most of it is just a collection of utility functions to make querying the APIs a little easier. Most of the heavy lifting is done by this function right here. We are making a GET request to the openlibrary.org/search/inside JSON endpoint. And then here you can see we add quotes. And then we add the query, which in this case was thanks for all the fish. And then after the GET request completes to this URL, we have a function who is responsible for capturing the response from the server, and then we can do whatever we want with those full text search results. And in this case, we have a function here that listens for a key up on our book search input. So the book search is this right here. And when there's a key up event, meaning we type a character, then we do an open library search, and we pass in the value of our input element, which is, in this case, is thanks for all the fish. And then the callback function that we provide essentially just processes the JSON output that the server sends us, and we add or remove a loading class, and then we append a clickable little book cover here that will take you directly to the book. And that's what this is. When I click, it brings us directly to the book on Open Library. So the whole thing can kind of be thrown together in maybe half an hour of programming. And if you do want to try out this example or play with it yourself, you can go to github.com/archivelabs/bazam.org. And all of the code is within index.html, and that references two files in static. One is our JS index.js, and here's the 75 or so lines of code here that you can play around with and tweak. And then we have some style sheets and images as well, which you can change the styling to look however you want. Anyway, hopefully that gives you a better idea of the different APIs that are available on Open Library, so you can build your own cool stuff. A few things that you may be interested in. If you are making a lot of requests to Open Library, or you need thousands of different books at a time, please don't use our APIs if possible, because we intentionally make our entire data dump freely publicly available to anyone who wants to use Open Library's catalog for their own purposes. So our main priority, our top priority, is making sure that patrons around the world have access to our book catalog and to book contents through controlled digital lending. So if you are doing something that requires heavy use of our APIs, please reach out to me at mek@archive.org and consider clicking on these dumps and seeing if that serves your needs. On the Internet Archive Open Library-bots repo, you'll see a collection of bots that have been written by the community, and that's a great way to give back and to help the community clean up the catalog for everyone else. I hope that gives you a better idea of what the opportunities are on Open Library. If you like what we're doing, please do check us out on Twitter/OpenLibrary. Give us a follow. And also check us out on blog.openlibrary.org. You'll be able to learn about a lot of the different projects we are currently working on, like our new Library Explorer. And you might also find some neat tips about how to use our APIs and why they are structured the way that they are, such as we have a cool way of importing Goodreads data, and a lot of other utilities here that might make your life a little bit easier. Of course, if you do get stuck and don't know how to proceed, we have a Slack channel with a few hundred people who are on ready to answer your questions, and we also have a public Gitter. So if you go to our Open Library GitHub and you scroll down, you should see right here, Chat on Gitter. And that's a public way for you to ask for a Slack invite or just to ask a quick question about our APIs. Thank you so much for your time today. And if there's any way that I can help, please, again, send me an email at mek@archive.org. We'd love to hear from you. Cheers.